Hello, hi. I appreciate the... That was nice. I hope everyone's awake. I appreciate the organizer's sense of humor for putting me after the lovely talk from Ebru about Watson, actually, especially because I'm also going to be talking about AI. However, I think it'll be a nice segue into what I want to discuss and talk a little bit about and share as well, actually. So I promise this won't be the same talk as you just heard, but in English. I'll be trying to demonstrate basically how myself and my team have tried to approach AI, how we've tried to kind of weave it into our daily work as much as possible. Maybe I can just start off first with a bit of an introduction. So time is short, but my name is Ray. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm actually a product design lead. So I'm a designer. I've been designing for 14 years now. I've worked in agencies, I've worked in consultancies, I've worked also in-house, and right now I'm working at a large, Europe's largest fashion e-commerce company called Zalando. We're based in Berlin. As I mentioned, I'm a designer, so I wanted to kind of spend a little bit of time telling you about our story about how we've tried to actually take technology, tools like AI, how we've actually tried to approach it as well, because as we've heard, it's something very futuristic, it's something that's very intangible to us, and maybe you actually also fear it. So I want to share essentially how we've actually tried to have a mindset shift, how we've actually tried to get more comfortable with it, and also how we've embedded it within our tools, and also demonstrate a very quick case study at the end. The clicker doesn't work. Is there someone that can help me with this?
Is there another clicker here? There should be another clicker.
No.
Have you tried both of them?
It's during a different...
Should be this one.
It's this one. How does that click? Ah, perfect. Thank you. Sorry. So when I was thinking about AI, the first thing I thought was actually I was a bit confused. And I think most designers tend to be a bit confused as well. Ultimately, it's a new concept. There's a lot of unknown terms, a lot of jargon, basically. This is just an image that I found on Google. A lot of these terms, to me, make some sense. Some of them make no sense. Some of them also have multiple meanings as well, which is really quite hard to grasp. And when things are confusing, we tend to just kind of explode. We can do some things, we can investigate it, but most of us actually tend to just stick our heads in the sand. We tend to just go like, do you know what? It's so far in the future, let's not be concerned about it. Let's just kind of do our daily work, because that's bringing me joy. It means the cogs are still moving, I'm still making money, I'm still kind of, I'm still doing what I enjoy, which is design. But unfortunately, it's not that easy. Because we ultimately fear it, we put our head in the sand, we should really actually learn to embrace it a little bit more. I mentioned the word fear. How do you embrace fear? Fear is a really difficult thing. Some people run away from it, some people love to just attack it. It's fine either way. It's not to say that you should be one or the other, but the approach can be slightly different. And what I want to talk a little bit about is that actually, even though there are these two different approaches, fear has always been a constant in our history. It's always been there in a sense that actually we can see throughout our history lots of different examples of where fear has manifested itself. Where innovations have happened. And I want to actually reference something that, as a designer, I learned a lot about when I was studying, and that's the printing process. So back in early days, before any of us were alive, probably, I hope anyway, Books were made in a very long and laborious way until this guy came along. His name is Johannes Gutenberg. He was a pretty cool guy. He invented what is known as, or called right now, movable type. Movable type was the single most influential invention in the printing process. Why? Because it meant that the long and laborious processes that used to actually happen beforehand, where scribes would essentially actually take a book, an existing piece of copy, take some new paper, and copy everything word for word. And you would have rooms, maybe rooms the size of this, with this many scribes sitting there basically, and actually painstakingly copying every single thing. And the printing process, or the movable type invention, was feared because it meant the scribes were like, crap, what's my job? What do I do now? In the previous presentation, I still get that sense of a feeling, watching those videos in that meeting where I've worked in agencies, I've seen, okay, in machines now, we're all sitting around as people going like, oh my God, what do we actually kind of say to the client now? And then the machine comes up with one single answer. That's tough, right? However, what I wanted to demonstrate is that actually there was still a future for these scribes. Because this is an image from the Gutenberg Bible, the first ever book that was made using the printing process. And what you see there is words, but you also see beautiful illustrations. And what happened was the scribes didn't have to copy and paste anymore the individual words, but they could spend time creating beautiful illustrations, augmenting the experience of reading a book. It was no more now just about information transfer, it was about enjoyment. It was about joy of use. And so therefore, it wasn't the fact that the scribes didn't have any more of a job, it meant that they just needed to adapt. They needed to just change their mindset a little bit, work slightly differently. And maybe actually we can see some parallels here with what we do as designers. Because is it really enjoyable pulling out basically all of these excuses to a client? No. What we need to do is to work with these tools to interrogate actually what we should be communicating and how we should be actually putting forward concepts and ideas. So I like to think of AI, I like to think of machine learning, I like to think of all these terms essentially a way of augmenting ourselves. And we have to accept it because it might take a while, but ultimately innovation always wins out. So what might this idea be? I like to think of AI almost like your own personal little factory. Imagine you as the designer sitting there at your desk, at your laptop, thinking, inspiring yourself, getting sketching and stuff like that. What are the things that you hate doing the most? Well, we can have a think about those things, we can have a look at them, and maybe actually this little factory, this AI, these tools could help us in doing those things so that we can spend more time doing the things that we enjoy. It's no more than that. And if we were to even think about it, extrapolate it even more, maybe actually AI means that we can sit there and do nothing and still get paid for it. This is an example in 2013 where it's not exactly the same concept, but an engineer essentially hired someone to do his job for him. It meant that he still got paid. He was still actually doing the work. He was enabled by someone else doing it. The only issue that he got fired for was ultimately for security breaches. But conceptually, it's the same thing. You can outsource the laborious tasks to a tool that harnesses the technology, basically, of AI. Now, we talked about fear. Now, how do we actually move on from that? The next stage that I started to think about is when you've got over your fear, you start getting intrigued by it. You start wanting to dip your toes, learn a little bit more. So these are the three terms. We've seen them previously in the presentation before: AI, machine learning, deep learning. I want to share with you essentially a very quick explanation into what these three terms meant for me, because I was super confused when I actually heard about them in the beginning. They're interchangeably used, They have different schools of thought in terms of how they're actually defined. So these are three things. AI is the act of a programmed entity that performs tasks in the way of human intelligence. Machine learning is just one of the many ways to achieve AI. And deep learning, something you might have heard, is just one of the many ways to achieve machine learning. Hopefully that helps you clarify some of that opacity, because it's not that complex. Well, it's complex, but once you get your head around it and actually work within this organization structure, it makes it a little bit clearer to learn. So, I need to go back a little bit. We challenged ourselves. We wanted to actually mean, well, now we've got the definition, how do we actually engage as designers with this tool? So we asked ourselves very tough questions. We sat around, we had a bit of a breakfast session basically in our company with designers, and we asked ourselves basically, what are the challenges that we have? What are the fears that we have? And in the individual teams, they actually filled out a bit of a worksheet. What are our fears? It scares us because, but we see opportunities in. And then from that, the teams actually wrote a story. How can they actually enhance their work with these tools? How can they actually help themselves as well? What we actually learned from this as well is that some designers were already leveraging this technology, these tools, without even knowing about it. They were working with data scientists, and they were working with AI, and but they had a fear of AI at the same time, which is kind of, it was paradoxical in a sense, but only because they then started realizing, putting words down, that they were actually already working with this stuff. So once you actually have that intrigue, you can then start to really fully understand it. By putting words down on paper, you can see what it means for yourself in your daily work. I want to just talk about how we think holistically, and this isn't basically the only way of doing it, but how we've actually thought that AI could help augment our work processes, our methodologies as well and stuff. So we at Zalando have call it agile, call it waterfall, whatever. We have a methodology, a process in terms of releasing products. We call it the 4Ds. I won't go into too much detail because that's another talk. We start off with discovery, then we go into definition, then we go into design and deliver. Now, within each of these 4 steps, designers are present. Designers are there to help formulate that problem, ask the question, all the way to making sure that what you customers see on the screen is as per expected. And so we should ask ourselves as designers, how can we leverage a tool like AI within each of these steps? These are some examples. So in the discovery phase, AI might help designers find commonalities and themes in what exists to inspire us to be creative, as we saw before. It's just a tool, an algorithm that draws certain things, matches certain topics together, brings to the fore basically stronger trends and stronger linkages. Within the definition phase, a designer might actually use AI to flesh out the many different iterations to test at a very fast pace. Because as a designer, we don't just design what we want, we design ultimately what customers want. We interrogate our designs, we show them to people, we learn about it. To do that, we need to try different things. What if this version, tweak it a little bit more, iterate on it, and so on. And AI might help us do that in a very fast way. It also means that once you've actually created these designs and you're testing them, you've probably sat in a user testing session. At the end of it, you're faced with all this information. How do you go through it all? How do you synthesize it all together? AI can help you do that. And the delivery phase, we probably focus our designs on creating 1 or 2 different touch points. There are so many screen sizes out there, we can't design for every single one at the same time. And so maybe AI can help a designer actually execute all of the different touch points to make sure that they're as best as possible, best in class, at speed as well. As I said, these are just excerpts. I would encourage you to have a think about maybe within your own methodologies how AI might help you as a designer, how you might leverage its skills, how might you use something basically that gets rid of all those laborious and boring things that you don't want to do into something that to actually mean that you can focus on things that you do want to do. You don't have to synthesize your reports anymore, but you can spend time figuring out how to word those insights and how to present them and how to deliver them and turn them into compelling concepts. So now we've got them into our methodologies and processes. What does it actually look like at the end? These are just theoretical, right? So I want to just demonstrate through one particular case study where we've been working with data scientists, we've been working with engineers, a whole product team basically to deliver something. And it's purely basically placed within, we use a lot of algorithms to actually bubble up some of the executions that we've created. And that's the last stage, Act 5, mastery, because once you've understood it, once you've been intrigued, once you've got over your fears, you can then actually master it. In this case study, we had some user problems that were very evident when we were talking to users. You don't have to read through them, but contextually wise, I would just say that they came through user interviews, they came through quantitative data such as NPS surveys, and also very field trips, so ethnographical research as well. Essentially, these three comments center on two concepts. Zalando has got at any time 500 to 800,000 articles to sell. And so how do you combine these articles into outfits? As I mentioned, 500,000 articles is pretty tough to navigate yourself around as well. So how do you choose? There's too much choice. And so when we're faced with these kind of problems, actually, I won't go through the whole process, but the first thing we wanted to try out of many things we did, is within the wish list page, so you create an account, you can actually save things to your wish list. We would pop up, when you select a particular product, some recommendations, things that go with that particular jacket. So with the jacket, we see this dress, pair of boots, accessories, would go really nicely with it. As a concept, it's great, but we're in a personalized world. Everything that gets shown there is different for every single customer, potentially. How do we do that? What we did was we actually populated that module with articles from different sources. We ran a few algorithms in conjunction also with a human set that actually was human curated. We tested this because it was actually kind of a rudimentary Turing test, if you will. We wanted to validate actually the algorithms that we were designing. That's what I mean, the algorithms we were designing. So again, AI will not replace designers. Designers need to actually take on the power to actually work with a new mode. So our designers were sitting there with data scientists to understand actually what is the constellation of tags? What is the constellation of what comes together basically to make a great outfit? Because as a fashion company, you don't want to show crap there. You need to have something that makes sense. And also, fashion is interesting because it's subjective as well. So after this Turing test, this rudimentary Turing test, we found out actually that we had them battle each other, typical A/B test basically, in a scenario. And we found out that the algorithms were not as robust as we actually imagined them to be. One quote from our engineering team was, like humans, machines are limited to what they know based on what they've seen before. That's machine learning. And so you have to educate it still. You have to actually tweak it, work with it. So in terms of learnings, as I mentioned, one algorithm performed better than its human-curated training set, while the others are worse. So again, it means that the human mind, the human mindset on things will not go away. We're there to tweak it, to coach the best performance out of it. We also learned that the good indication of quality of apps is still a highly subjective topic. Style and taste are a personal thing, which means that there's going to have a lot of work to be done on these algorithms. A lot of work to actually make sure that they're flexible. They accommodate trends, seasonal considerations. But we did find some really strong insights in actually how hard it is and how easy it is to combine certain items, characteristics, and categories. I just want to leave you with some key outcomes of this particular test. So encapsulating everything I've been mentioning, I hope that this is inspiration to you to actually understand that AI is not a tool that you should be scared of. It's not a tool that is completely in a black box somewhere out there which you can't touch. It's fully within your grasp. And also, it's not going to replace your jobs. All it's going to do is be another tool that you can use to do your job better and in a much more enjoyable way. Because it doesn't just help us, it doesn't just help users, but as you can see from here, it also helps the business. Thank you.